I don't think I've ever watched those Planet of the Apes movies. However, I've always been attracted to interactive movies in general. It all started with the Choose Your Own Adventure books from back in the day. I'm sure many of my viewers know what I'm talking about, but for the others who don't, I will explain briefly. Those books were the first step towards real RPG games. You would start at the beginning of the book, and after a short introduction, you will come to a point where you have to decide what our protagonist has to do. The book will tell you something like, if you want to attack the bandits, move to page 45. If you want to sneak past them, move to page 73. And it would go even further, with some games telling you to get a couple of dice and roll them in order to see how successful you were at something. It was a magical time, and I actually have a huge collection of those books, which I still read sometimes when I feel like it. The point I'm making here is that interactive movies are essentially the same idea, but instead of reading a book, you're watching a movie. And similarly to how those books were working, the movie will continue, and at some point you will be asked to make a choice. A very famous recent one is the movie Bandersnatch from Netflix. If you have access to the streaming service, you have to try it. It's kind of fun. In any case, Planet of the Apes: A New Frontier is exactly the same thing. It will install on your computer and pretend to be a game, but in actuality, you're watching a movie with the occasional choices being offered to you. It's quite a curious thing. If you go and take a look inside the files, you will find out the whole thing is essentially a custom video player and a bunch of video files. That's it, nothing more. I was actually surprised to see that. It also means that everything you see is not rendered in real time. If your machine can run a 1080p video, then this will work just fine regardless how much of a potato you have. Therefore, ultra-wide is not really possible here, since everything is pre-recorded and rendered in advance. With that being said, I really wasn't expecting it in the first place, so I wasn't that disappointed. My first issue with it is that the animation doesn't really look that good. I mean, if you're going to give me something that my PC doesn't even have to really process, why not make something insanely beautiful? The graphics look as though you're playing an older game. I mean, they're not terrible, but they're still far from anything that we're used to now in modern times. The same goes for the animations, really. The decisions in this interactive movie come up often enough, but for the most part suffer from the same sickness that has been plaguing every other such product, namely that most choices don't really matter at all. You're often presented with several options, but only one is truly what the makers of this movie wanted, so the others will lead to the same outcome regardless of your choice. If, for example, you happen to reject something that the movie considers important, you will either watch a sequence in which another character approaches yours and convinces them, or your character will straight out defy your choice and accept anyway. These moments annoy me greatly. Another thing that I find strange was the fact that there were random FPS drops while watching the movie. They would only occur for a short time, and I suspect that they probably happen when the next video file is being loaded. Clearly the custom player at work here isn't that good, but still, it is what it is. Let's talk about the actual story. You experience two sides of a complicated conflict. It appears in this world there are apes which can talk and use human weapons. They're highly intelligent and know not to show themselves to the humans. We get to play as one such ape, who also happens to be one of the three sons of the leader of his tribe. The harsh winter is taking its toll on everyone. Food is scarce, tensions rise high, and the leader asks his three sons to go out for food together. It's interesting to note that the apes communicate with grunts amongst each other. We get subtitles, but they almost never actually speak. Only from time to time do they utter a few words. This felt somehow appropriate and worked well. They all have different characters, although those seem a bit stereotypical at times. Our protagonist is honorable and intelligent. He has a younger brother who is immature and inexperienced, but appears to have a good heart. And then there's the older brother. He's strong, aggressive, and, well, stupid. He doesn't really listen and acts like he knows best. It's his actions that trigger the events of this movie. As the apes venture forth in the search for food, the movie switches to a nearby settlement. We now control the actions of Jess. She's introduced to us while attending the funeral of her husband. We learn that she has a young son and was the wife of the leader of the settlement, and the responsibility to lead now falls on her. From the looks of things, we can conclude that this is some kind of a post-apocalyptic setting. The humans also have food shortage problems, and our female protagonist's new leadership position is shaky at best. As the viewer, you get to choose how she behaves towards others and who will respect her. This movie constantly places the viewer before decisions which will prioritize one side over another, and it actually shows us what our protagonist's relationships with the other main characters are at the end of each chapter. The apes have their own mountain, however, they decide to go down and enter the human territory. led by the eldest of three brothers. They decide to steal some of the humans' cattle, a gunfight ensues, and one of the humans gets killed in the process. This is how the story begins, and as it develops, more intrigues unfold. We're constantly shown the perspective of each side and effectively have to decide which of these sides should prevail. Based on our decisions, we get to watch one of the three possible endings. At some junctures, while both factions interact with each other, the movie does something unexpected and switches your character without really telling you. You are currently on a human segment when the apes appear and a battle ensues. Suddenly you have to make a choice and realize that this choice was actually deciding what the apes should do. This happens rarely and is not critical, but it felt confusing when it did. Still, the surprise seems like a good move and made the battle more interesting. The story actually became quite good. I was watching the movie and making decisions because I wanted to see what will happen. The movie takes between 2 and 3 hours to complete, depending on what choices you make. It's clearly designed in such a way that the player should replay it in order to see all possible outcomes, but I ended up just watching the other two endings on YouTube. While there are a lot of choices to be made, I didn't feel like watching mostly the same movie several times. It just gets boring to me. For that, it's simply too long. With all of its flaws, Planet of the Apes Last Frontier was an enjoyable experience. I would have preferred either live action or much better graphics, to be honest, but it is what it is, like I said before. This movie somehow reminded me of the Telltale games, which is generally not the best comparison because while these games managed to tell a decent story, graphically speaking and gameplay wise, they were extremely limited. Still, the story was good and kept me entertained, and that's really what matters. So should you watch this interactive movie? It really comes down to the price. This is not a premium product. It currently costs €20 on Steam, which simply seems way too expensive to me. If, say, it went down to $10, I'd actually recommend it. It's fun enough and you can even watch it with friends, creating a fun group activity of arguing over decisions and outcomes. You've reached the end of this video. Sadly, my videos aren't as interactive, but you can simply click on one of the other ones and suddenly you'll be watching a different review as a consequence of your choice. But jokes aside, thank you for watching my videos and have a great day.